Hey everyone, and welcome back to Retro Legends. In 1993, Capcom did something unexpected and revolutionary. They combined the world of arcade games with the most famous role-playing game in the world. The result was Dungeons & Dragons, Tower of Doom, a deep and complex fantasy beat-em-up with elements taken directly from the famous Advanced Dungeons & Dragons universe by TSR. In an era dominated by side-scrolling beat-em-ups like Final Fight, Streets of Rage, and Golden Axe, Capcom decided to raise the bar, introducing multiple choices, characters with distinct classes, magic spells, inventory management, and branching dialogues. Let's begin. The development of Dungeons & Dragons Tower of Doom started in the early 1990s, at a time when Capcom was at the peak of its creative brilliance in the arcade world, fresh off the global success of Street Fighter II and eager to explore new horizons. The idea came from Noritaka Funamizu, a legendary producer at the company and a huge fan of tabletop role-playing games, who proposed creating a side-scrolling beat-em-up directly inspired by the Dungeons & Dragons universe. It wasn't just about adding fantasy elements, but about adapting the actual mechanics from the TSR manuals into an arcade experience: classes, spells, branching dialogues, items, and moral choices. Securing the official license was far from easy. At the time, TSR was extremely protective of its intellectual property, and collaborations with Japanese companies were almost unheard of. Yet, Capcom managed to convince the American publisher, thanks to the strength of its proposal and the prestige it had earned in the arcade industry. Once they got the green light, an intense and unique collaboration began. TSR provided Capcom with a huge amount of material, including manuals, technical documents, and even direct consultation with the tabletop game's authors. However, Capcom didn't just follow the American guidelines. The Japanese studio reinterpreted many concepts to adapt them to the fast-paced nature of arcades, managing to create a rare balance between faithfulness to the source material and immediate gameplay. The team faced an unprecedented challenge: how to translate the depth of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons into a context where the average game lasted a few minutes and where the player was used to pure and immediate action. The result was a hybrid and fascinating product, capable of offering a true role-playing experience in an arcade format, something no one had ever dared to attempt before. The result was surprising and unexpectedly deep for an arcade game of that time. Tower of Doom was set in the world of Mystara, one of the official Dungeons & Dragons settings. It wasn't as well known as Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance, but it was full of rich stories, races, cultures, and history. Capcom chose Mystara because it allowed them to tell different kinds of stories and had a variety of settings that fit well with the game's episodic format. At the start of the adventure, players could choose from 4 distinct classes: the warrior, strong and tough; the cleric, able to heal and banish the undead; the elf, a mix of swordsman and mage; and the dwarf, powerful in close combat but more agile than you might expect. Each of these classes offered a unique playstyle with different sets of weapons, spells, and controls, encouraging cooperation between players. The combat system allowed players to not only face hordes of enemies in real time, but also to collect gold, buy items in shops, manage their inventory, cast spells, and use strategies against bosses faithfully inspired by the tabletop game, like regenerating trolls, bloodthirsty minotaurs, and the fearsome black dragon, capable of wiping out the entire party with a single breath. One of the game's biggest innovations was the presence of narrative choices. During the adventure, players had to make decisions that affected their path, unlocking alternative scenarios and different battles. This system not only increased the game's replay value, but also contributed to the feeling of playing a real tabletop RPG campaign, with a complex narrative progression and a consistent world that reacted to the characters' choices. Dungeons & Dragons Tower of Doom was developed using Capcom's CPS-2 arcade hardware. This powerful system was top of the line for arcade games at the time, and had already powered visually impressive games like Alien vs. Predator, X-Men, Children of the Atom, and Darkstalkers. However, even with all its power, the CPS-2 was pushed to its limits by this project. The development team faced many challenges in making sure the action ran smoothly. They had to handle screens full of enemies with different attack patterns, create rich and detailed animations for the playable characters, and designed visual effects for spells and magical weapons, all while incorporating a complex interface that showed the player's inventory, health bar, and various options. Everything had to work perfectly in real time, without any slowdown, or it would ruin the experience. When it came to the art style, Capcom decided to entrust the visual direction to one of their most famous talents, Akira Akiman Yasuda, who was already responsible for many of the iconic designs in Street Fighter. Akiman immersed himself in the advanced Dungeons and Dragons manuals, drawing inspiration directly from creatures like the owlbear, the troll, and the mind flayer. However, he reinterpreted them with the bold and dynamic style that defined Capcom's games. The result was a cast of memorable enemies and characters that stayed true to the D&D aesthetic but were also perfectly suited to the visual style of Japanese arcade games. The soundtrack also played a key role in defining the game's identity. Moving away from the electronic sounds typical of side-scrolling beat-em-ups, Tower of Doom featured an epic and majestic orchestral score, which gave the adventure an almost cinematic feel. The music, composed with great attention to fantasy atmosphere, perfectly accompanied the action and truly evoked the feeling of a real Dungeons and Dragons campaign, a perilous journey full of mystery, monsters, and magic. Even in terms of sound, Capcom proved that they wanted to create something far more ambitious than a simple coin-operated arcade game. Despite its high technical, artistic, and playful quality, Dungeons and Dragons, Tower of Doom never achieved widespread distribution in Western markets. The game, in fact, was distributed selectively, especially in the United States and Europe, where only a few high-end arcades received the cabinet. The very nature of the game also contributed to discouraging wider distribution. Unlike the traditional quick and easy beat-em-ups, Tower of Doom was a more complex title, which required time, attention, and a certain familiarity with the mechanics of role-playing games. Elements like the different classes, the multiple choices in the paths, the inventory, the use of objects and spells were innovative for the arcade environment, but they were difficult for the more casual audience used to direct and frenetic experiences. This approach, while appreciated by a niche of enthusiasts, contributed to making it a cult title rather than a commercial success. For years, Tower of Doom remained a legendary memory for those lucky enough to try it in the arcade, an experience that combined the frenzy of action arcade with the depth of a cooperative fantasy campaign. Only with the advent of MAME emulation and later, with the release of the Dungeons and Dragons, Chronicles of Mystara collection on modern consoles and PCs, could a new generation of players finally rediscover this forgotten masterpiece. The charm of Tower of Doom was not only in its aesthetics or gameplay, but in the feeling, very rare at the time, of experiencing a tabletop adventure together with friends, in the heart of an arcade. A dream for many D&D fans that for once also found space under the neon lights in the din of arcade cabinets. During the beginning stages of development, Capcom had planned for a much bigger group of characters for Dungeons and Dragons Tower of Doom. Besides the basic classes in the final game, cleric, fighter, elf, and dwarf, the team already had rough drafts for at least 2 more iconic classes from the D&D world, the mage and the thief. However, because of tight deadlines, a limited budget, and the technical limitations of arcade hardware, these characters were put to the side, but never completely forgotten. The idea was ambitious, to include a game system that reflected the versatility and customization typical of tabletop campaigns. But doing it within the arcade format wasn't easy. Integrating classes with special abilities, spells, and stealth techniques required time and extensive testing, which the original project couldn't afford. Luckily, that cut content didn't go to waste. With the critical success of Tower of Doom, and the growing interest in a more evolved formula, Capcom could finally realize their vision with the sequel, Dungeons and Dragons Shadow over Mystara, released in 1996. This second chapter was an improvement in every way. It introduced the missing classes, offered a wider range of items, weapons and equipment, and perfected the combat system with combos, more dynamic magic, and even deeper cooperation between players. Even the storytelling was expanded with narrative forks in the road, alternate paths, and multiple endings, elements that made each game potentially different. Shadow over Mystara became not just a sequel, but a true consecration of what Tower of Doom had started. the fusion between the world of role-playing games and the immediacy of arcades in a perfect balance of action, strategy, and fantasy atmosphere. Today, Dungeons & Dragons. Tower of Doom is remembered with great fondness and respect by both arcade and role-playing game fans. It's a title that, although it never achieved the global fame of other Capcom classics like Street Fighter II or Final Fight, left a deep mark on the hearts of the most attentive and passionate players. Its ability to combine engaging action gameplay with elements typical of RPGs, such as inventory management, narrative choices, classes, and abilities, was something revolutionary for its time. In a context dominated by fast and immediate games designed to consume tokens in a matter of minutes, Tower of Doom was a courageous exception, a slower, more thoughtful experience, full of atmosphere and rich in detail. Capcom showed that even in the world of arcade cabinets it was possible to tell stories, create complex worlds, and give space to tactical cooperation. Even today the game is celebrated in retro collections, speedruns, online tournaments, and dedicated communities, confirming its cult status. For many, Tower of Doom is not just a beat-em-up with a fantasy setting, but a real meeting point between two worlds, that of arcade games and that of role-playing games, which had rarely spoken so well to each other. And with that, our journey into the past comes to an end. How many of these curiosities did you already know? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell for more journeys into the world of retro gaming. Thanks for watching Retro Legends, and see you in the next video. Stay retro, stay legends.